The American Revolution, in other words, is never finished. It must always be renewed.
Greater love than this hath no man, than that he lay down his life for his friend.
What if it's not envy?
We must take back our cities, and take back our culture, and take back our country. God bless you, and God bless America.
Welcome to another episode of Contramundum. Today we are discussing a speech that was given in 1994 at the American Renaissance Conference by Dr. and controversial figure Samuel T. Francis, one of the great paleoconservatives of the 80s and 90s. We're going to discuss this essay because, like everything else Sam Francis has written and talked about, it's increasingly relevant. You can see the themes that he emphasized there 30 years ago playing out today live all around us. And so Andrew's actually the one that chose this topic. So I'll actually pivot to him first to discuss why this one, why is this our initial Sam Francis conversation?
Yeah, I think this is, you listen to this particular talk and other than the fact that it's like super grainy, the audio is not very good. It looks like it's from 1994, but in terms of the content, it seems like it could have been given today, because right, he's picking up on themes and noticing a trajectory for our country that now is just obvious. Right now, it's hard to look at things and not see it. But in his day, he was very prescient and saw that things were going this direction, and then it was overt. It was purposeful. And so I thought, why not, when we introduce Sam Francis, why not just jump right into the deep end of the pool and talk about this? So the question I had for you, because I think you can probably give the audience a bit of context, is one, right, who is Dr. Sam Francis, or who was, he's now deceased, who was Dr. Sam Francis, and what was taking place in the early 1990s in the conservative movement that caused him to give a speech of this type?
Yeah. Well, Sam Francis is controversial is a good word for it, but that's not even touching the iceberg. But he's not someone that I think should be just in a low IQ way be associated with National Socialism or Nazism or Hitlerism, or these are the things that come to the front of the table when you discuss people like Francis. He very much was a man of the Old South. He was someone who recognized the historic origins of America within the context of Western civilization. More than anyone else, he was a political realist. And to him, the American project, the American themes like rights and liberties, all of those things were extremely particular. So in that way, you could think of Sam Francis as sort of like the preeminent realist. He was someone who eschewed all ideology and ideological commitments as some sort of transcendent priority above the ability of a people to defend and operate politically for themselves. And so that's kind of who he was. He was the second generation, what you could call a Burnhamite. He was a follower of James Burnham and his neo-Machiavellian approach to American history, but also American geopolitics and domestic politics as well. He was someone who was at one time one of the best and most awarded conservative writers in the nation. He wrote for National Review. He wrote for the Washington Times. He was a very well-reputed guy in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, so this was not just some quack or fringe figure that was saying a bunch of crazy stuff that nobody paid attention to. This was a very highly regarded person that, his columns in the Washington Times, he had wide syndication in basically every newspaper in the country. We don't think about those things anymore because newspapers really don't matter.
Yeah, but that mattered.
Anymore. But in the 90s, it did. That every town or small city, much less big metropolitan areas, had newspapers that everybody read. And the opinion section, he had his columns in many of them all throughout the entire country.
Yeah, he was in high demand for sure.
Yeah, and
so what happened? I think several things happened. Bill Buckley was trying to change the face of conservatism, right? He was trying to make it more palatable for the elite. And the elite at the time, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, was obviously known as the liberal establishment for a reason.
Yeah.
And Bill Buckley was trying to speak to that audience. And so one of the things that he had to do to speak to that audience was to purge those deemed not sufficiently mainstream. And so he was in a purge mode. And that was sort of the movement purpose of National Review. And Sam Francis didn't get hit right away, but he did by the time the 1990s rolled around. It could be in the late 80s, but I'm pretty sure it was in the 90s when he got axed from Washington Times.
Yeah.
So here was this guy, and what was happening at the time was the conservative movement was trying to be more mainstream. It was trying to be more palatable to the left. It was trying to be more palatable to the East Coast establishment and the liberals. But the other thing that was happening is Sam Francis was recognizing that what was actually happening in the West was not merely ideological, but it was also racial.
Yeah.
And we can say this today, like, okay, let me give you an example. The Trump administration recently launched an investigation into Nike for discriminating against white workers.
Yeah.
That's something that if you had said, we want the Department of Justice to go after a corporation for discriminating against whites, you would have been laughed out of the room.
Yeah, no one would have listened to you.
No, because that is a racial, like, look, you don't have to take an opinion on racial essentialism or racial nationalism or anything like that to recognize that this anti-white racism, this anti-white bigotry, which people like Jeremy Carl have written about.
Yeah.
It's a very normalized conversation now. People recognize that it's happening. Sam Francis was saying this is coming down the road 30 years ago. That's what makes him so important.
Well, yeah, you had just this last weekend, you had a Democratic congressman. What was his name?
Wu is his last name.
Wu. Very, very American name. Wu. And basically saying that collectively all of the non-white groups are a majority of the country and should begin operating as such against white oppressors.
Yeah.
Right. And this is something that was in Francis's time was an undercurrent of particularly in the left, but not just the left. I mean, even in this video, in this talk that he gave, right, he's talking about how media and corporate elites and all of our institutions already had this kind of anti-white bent.
Right.
And so, but it was always implicit. It was very rarely very explicit and overt. But now they've gotten so much power that they can just flat out say it and feel comfortable saying it, that there's not going to be any repercussions for saying it.
Right.
That they're not going to get any trouble doing so. And so you see things like that, or even, I mean, I know CJ, you're a huge fan of the Super Bowl, a big fan of NFL football, but it is obviously the Super Bowl is like the pinnacle cultural event in terms of popular culture in America. And just, this last Sunday, what was it? We had a Puerto Rican man saying entirely in Spanish to an audience of like 150 million, and a man of questionable sexuality, and it's like all of this. And what is the point of doing that? Why would they do this?
Yeah.
In the Super Bowl, it's to say, all right, Americans, this country isn't yours anymore.
Exactly.
This is theirs. They're the majority now. You are the minority, and we're going to rub it in your face. Right. That's the point of that.
Well, yeah. So we're going through history with my kids, and we were talking about the Robert E. Lee statue and just the role of defacement and defilement of symbols is extremely important. It's not just a random, it's just a block of stone. You can, just paint it.
Who cares? Yeah.
And it actually, all the defilements of symbols and all raising of symbols, all construction and erectment of these things actually reflect the cultural hegemony of a people.
Yeah.
And so when you defile things, what you're doing is you're reminding them of what their place is in the new hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the Super Bowl. And it's the same thing that Sam Francis had been calling for 30 years. And it's the same reason that he was kicked out of the Washington Times, because he saw this. And the reason that he saw this was not just because he was, was disgruntled or something like that. He was unwilling to accept multiracialism and he was a bigot. But I think the reason that he saw this is because he spent more time than almost anyone of his generation deep in the literature of the New Left. And he recognized that the post-Marxist left was no longer economically motivated, but culturally motivated. And so part of the cultural apparatus in America was transitioning between economic class warfare and more into racial class warfare. And so Western civilization is caught up with Europeans and those of European descent. And so he recognized that in order to deconstruct Western civilization, they had to go after the core of the American ethnic groups. And that was the whites. And it's really hard to speak like that, I think, for a lot of people. But he saw that this was inevitable. It was planned. They talked about this. They strategized this. This was their plan to deconstruct Western civilization, was to go after the people themselves.
Yeah. One of the things that he brought up in this speech is thinking or operating in explicitly racial terms, which of course is even now, even after all we've been through, even after the summer of Floyd in 2020 and the racial reckoning that happened, and the fallout of that since, it's still something that's very uncomfortable for Americans of European descent to even think about. Right? It's not something that we're comfortable doing. It's not something that we wake up in the morning and think about the world in these terms. But a point that he makes in there is that every other group does do this. Every other group does think in terms of collective, whereas like white Americans think in terms of individuals.
Yeah,
that I'm merely an individual. I'm not part of a collective group, but everyone else is, and they think about it in those terms. They think of you as an individual, as a collection of almost atomized individuals, as a collective that needs to be overcome.
Yeah.
And he says in there that the solution to these problems is to begin thinking in these terms. Do you think that's even possible? Do you think that people are ever going to be willing to do this?
Yes, I do think it's possible, because I think the way that history moves is I've learned lessons from people like Hegel and the movement of history, that when you have
Hegelianism.
I know.
Oh, no.
when you have a certain trend or theme in history and it's motivated by a singular enemy, that enemy, for survival reasons, begins to think in terms of its group interests. And so I think it's inevitable. Now, Sam Francis was saying in the 1990s that we better wake up because we only have a few years left until it's not possible anymore. So whether it's possible to actually succeed and win is one question. Whether we will think in terms of our group identity is another question. Now, what Sam Francis was not saying was it is a moral thing to collectivize as a group and to operate racially. What he was actually saying was that given the paradigm, given the nature of the enemy and the way the things that they're organizing around, you cannot leverage ideology against that. It doesn't. That's not how politics works. Ideology cannot confront a friend-enemy distinction like that. And so just in realistic terms, maybe it's immoral, but just in realistic terms, politics has to be taken on its own terms. And you have to realize that they don't care about your ideology. They will weaponize it against you. They will appeal to their rights. They will appeal to liberty. They will appeal to Christianity and love and tolerance and all of these things. They'll say whatever they want, but the fact of the matter is that at its heart, it is a case against the existence of white people. That's how they operate, and that's what the agitators frame their own agenda as being for. So we need to start recognizing that, and this is the hardest thing I think for Christians and conservatives to recognize, is that this isn't hyperbole. This is actually what motivates them.
Yeah. I mean, you see this with I keep going back to the Super Bowl only because it's a very poignant example. That on the screen in the back they had a sign which said the only thing more powerful than hate is love, or something along those lines. And of course, if you decipher what that message means, right? What do they define as hate? Right? They define as hate having a country that is yours, having a heritage, having a continued existence of a place called America. That's hate. What is love? Right? Gay race communism is love.
Mhm.
Right. And so, so you read it in those, but they're weaponizing Christian language, right? Hate and love, against the people of this country.
Yeah.
But he also said in this speech that they're also like you alluded to, they also will weaponize liberalism,
Mhm.
right? Liberal principle. And they'll do that. They'll continue to do that until they have complete power, and then it will just turn into sheer authoritarianism along racial lines. I mean, you even see this to a certain extent. I mean, it's interesting the talk that he gave. You could clearly see. Okay, it's you could tell when it was. Just by the context, right? He makes a great deal out of the Rodney King riots when the officers were acquitted, and riots erupted in Los Angeles over their acquittal, and that was very much a 2020 type event in the 1990s, and it's interesting because I mean there was just this case. I think it was in Kentucky. Maybe you saw this, where a black kid raped a white woman, a young girl, showed zero remorse for it, and the black lady judge cut his sentence in half, even though he, to the victim said, "All right, I'm going to get out in 20 years. I'm going to do it again." Like all sorts of things like this, like no remorse whatsoever, and she just cuts his sentence in half. And the only conclusion you could reach is, well, it's because she's viewing these things in explicit racial terms. That this is one of her people who she feels is being oppressed by an evil white system that is systemically racist against him, and so she's going to lessen his sentence, even though, right, he deserves much worse than he got. And so you see these things in those terms that. It's just beneath the surface, right? The racial resentment that exists, and I think, I mean, there's certainly a much larger percentage of people in America that are now able to recognize what is happening in the same way that Francis did, over 30 years ago. But it's still not the majority of the country that views it this way. So I don't know. I have a hard time thinking that, like, what event is going to make everyone wake up and see the writing on the wall, see that this is occurring.
I think things like this don't come from events. I think they come from just the slow process of looking around you and realizing who the elites are, who the people in power are, whether they represent you, and just seeing as representatives continue to speak like Wu does. Like more and more people recognize it. Like, you and I are millennials. I think a lot more Zoomers see very clearly what's happened over the last 40 years. And so I think that it's just going to be this slow generational self-consciousness. So that kind of leads me to a question for you.
Yeah.
One of the things that people think about when they hear words like, collective action or group identity or something is that you therefore have to hate everybody who's not in that group. So like when we speak in terms of like, if their goal and objective is to eliminate white America, that's what they're doing. That's what they say.
They say those things.
They say they're doing.
Yeah.
So if our goal is to defend that from the opposition, does that mean we therefore hate everybody who's not in that group?
No, of course not.
Because that's the implication.
Yeah.
That's
of course,
what they charge you with.
Yeah, of course it always is. It's simply, right. Do I and people like me, are we allowed to exist? Right. Right. Are we? Can we defend our own existence as a people? That's really the question. I mean, one of the things that he he brings up in there is both Europe, what's called Western civilization, Europe and the United States, and the Anglosphere in general, Canada, Australia, so forth. That in the last century, really the second half of the last century, that these places have come under intense attack, right? It particularly in demographic terms, that nowhere is allowed to be a European countries aren't allowed to exist anymore as a discrete entity. You have to accept millions of people from the third world into your nation, whether it's France or Germany, the United States, Sweden, wherever. That you can't exist as a discrete entity any longer, and that is taken as a great evil to even consider that you might be able to have your own nation with your own people. And an interesting point that he made is it's like, well, something like the United States or something like Western Europe, those exist because of the peoples that made them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't. It isn't an economic zone where you can just plug in any amount of human capital from anywhere in the world. It's a distinct people that made them and created them and sustained them and keep them going. And it sort of becomes a ship of Theseus problem, where at a certain point, the constituent parts, when you've replaced enough of them, it no longer is the thing that it originally was. And you can see that. I mean, he brought up the example of like South Africa, or you could bring up Rhodesia as well, right? Those geographical areas, still exist, but the nation that was South Africa, that was created by English and Dutch and so forth, right? That doesn't exist anymore. Even though there's many people of English and Dutch descent still in South Africa, it no longer is that same place, right? They aren't able to maintain that kind of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And if the people that currently running it could have made something like South Africa as it had existed, they would have done it anywhere, but they never could. And so, I mean, it's the same thing with America, that Anglo-Saxon peoples made America and created it and built it, and it's you can replace the population with Chinese and Indians and people from Latin American countries, but it won't be America any longer. That's more or less what he brought up, and that's a very controversial point to make, right? People don't want to make this point because it seems like you are arguing for like some kind of racial supremacy or something like that. But it's like, well, no, this is who made America, and it no longer, you get rid of those people, it no longer is America. I mean, it's just like Rome. Romans built Rome and made Rome what it is, and you replace it with Huns, it's no longer Rome anymore, and it collapses.
Mm-hmm.
It disappears. And so that's what will happen to Western Europe and to America when the demographics shift.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that brings up one of Sam Francis's like major contributions, is because he did have this idea that a nation was its people, and a nation without its people is no longer that same nation. But the reason they hated that was because this goes against their entire narrative of the meaning of America, which is that it's not a people, it's a zone, it's an economic zone. Yeah. It's a place where anyone can live and do anything, and you look at two people like so. For instance, if I showed you a picture of Congressman Wu, or his grandfather, and I showed you a picture of Davy Crockett, and you asked anyone in the 50s, like, which one of these looks more American? He would choose Davy Crockett,
of course.
That in itself is a revolution against what they pretend America is supposed to be. That's right. And that's why they hated Sam Francis.
Yeah, that America is Americans, That's
Yeah, and Americans are an ethnic group.
Yeah.
And we can speak in these terms
Yeah.
today because of trailblazers like Sam Francis.
yeah, that's right.
And look, this isn't just us making this up in the 90s because we have grievances because we're, being pushed to the side or anything.
Yeah.
This is from Teddy Roosevelt. This is from Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah.
They saw America as a people, as the growth of a new ethnic people that came out of the experiences of the frontier based on their roots in the British Isles and Western Europe more broadly. And we were our own people, and we were distinct not only from Western Europe, but we were distinct from all these other ethnicities around the world. And that's a good thing, and it's worth preserving because it is the lifeblood of our nation.
Yeah. And so I guess, the question I would ask is, do you think that these things will change? I mean, you already brought up that, like, as generations shift, partly the boomer generation, which was the most propagandized generation of all time. Francis made up the point, or brought up the point of popular culture. What popular culture is culture that's manufactured by the elites for the consumption of the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And the popular culture that the boomer generation consumed was egalitarian. It was universalist. It presented the idea of America as an economic zone where anybody could come here, and if they asserted or assented to the right propositions, they would ipso facto be American. And this is something that they believe at the deepest levels in their hearts. Whereas younger generations, which are much more cynical about popular culture, about anything that is any ideas that are foisted upon them, they're much more skeptical of them. Part of which I think is being raised on the internet and having access to alternative sources of information.
Sam Francis videos,
even being able to encounter someone like Sam Francis. That is shifting, and part of it too is, right, if you're coming of age in the late 70s and getting a job in corporate America or whatever, and you're a white Christian male American in 1979, all opportunity is going to be wide open to you, and it's only a question of how hard do you want to work to have success. Whereas young white Christian males in 2015, they are aware of the fact that they are at the very bottom of the racial and sexual hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so all sorts of opportunity is totally closed off to them. They know it. They're fully conscious of that fact. And so bearing all these things in mind, right, how long do you think it will take before people before they recognize this consciously, they organize, collectively? I don't think they're ever going to be like, we're going to be part of the white group that we're here to defend white America. I don't think anyone's going to necessarily talk in those terms.
I disagree with that.
Well, tell me why. Why do you disagree with that?
I think that people would be shocked to understand how race conscious younger people are.
Yeah.
Now, they're split because there are people like that, and they're probably more than people realize. But the other half of that same generation is extremely anti-white.
Yeah.
And so when you have a conflict like that, when it's very like bipolar and it's very polarized, you have to pick a lane. That's kind of where this is coming. So I don't know if it's that far away, but I think it's generational, and I think it's built into the cake of what's going to happen over the next 20 years. As this young generation of 18 to 25-year-olds, as they come of age, as they hit their 30s, and the boomer generation cycles out, I think it'll become a very widely discussed frame of politics in Washington.
Yeah. I can see that. I think the other question I have is, within this, he discussed how Christianity has been bastardized to defend the priorities of post-war egalitarianism and universalism, and we can see that all over the place, right? You can see this in all of the conflicts in the Reformed world right now that exist. The the OPC and the PCA and NAPARC, on a rampage against our friend Stephen Wolfe, calling him an ethno-nationalist and things like that, or a kinist or whatever. Which I'm still uncertain what that term even actually means, other than this guy sometimes talks about race. But they would probably call Sam Francis a kinist as well. But the question I have is why what within the frame of the church, within leadership of churches, how do you see these things changing? Because if this is a dynamic where younger people are much more racially conscious, they understand that there is rampant anti-white race hate against them, and so they recognize and operate sort of in these terms. But their leadership is going to be the very last people that come to grips with that. What do they do?
What do younger people
what
do?
What do people in churches do? I think this is a conflict that is starting to reach its zenith.
Yeah,
and it's really difficult because you're aware of things that the older guys who have a tremendous amount of wisdom in many ways. This is why they're elders. This is why they have leadership in churches. They are totally aloof to these realities. How do you operate there? How do you change anything?
Yeah, I mean, like, for one thing, I wouldn't be an agitator in the church.
Certainly,
No. I do think that this is one of the tensions of the several spheres of the way that God designs communities, that we have our natural connections, and then we have our our heavenly connections. And so the church is a place where we are one with people from all over the world, and we need to remember that. And so I wouldn't be, nothing that we say civilly and with regards to the well-being of the nation, I think applies in a straight over way to the church. And so there should be no effort to make this a church issue and to challenge your congregation to be racially pure, or to think in terms of racial friend enemies. That is not an appropriate thing for the church. The other thing is that I don't think it is part of the ultimate heavenly good, the well-being of the congregation, to speak in these terms. Now, what happens is these churches and these pastors, ironically, is they'll confuse the two kingdoms, and they will apply the universal nature of the church back into civil society. They're the ones that are making the category error, not us, when they do that. So they say that because the church is universal, therefore the civil kingdom has to have open borders and all these other things, which is not the way it is. And so I would suggest that people speak truthfully, study theology. A lot of these things have already been worked out. If you understand the proper nature of the church compared to the proper nature of the nation, I think that these things kind of define themselves, and you can go a long way. But I don't think the church is the right place to agitate for these things. You can speak truthfully to your Christian brothers, but I would not make it something that needs to be a priority of any congregation.
No, I would agree. I don't think that a church is the vehicle for these kinds of political fights. The issue that I have is that, say, young people are operating politically, and they're facing persecution from their churches because of that.
Yeah,
that I think is the bigger issue. It's not simply that, like, oh, they want they want to talk about racial things in the context of the church, right?
Mhm.
No, nobody does. It's, like you said, that a church is it is universal within the church.
Yeah.
But he also within that, right? If you did have this like a multiracial congregation, and the dynamic outside of the church is that non-white peoples are agitated to have open race hate toward whites,
Mhm.
right? That's something that should be rebuked and fought against within the church, right? That your people here can't just hate white people and be allowed to just openly do that.
Well, this is why
But they don't do it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's like, instead, anyone who's like, hey, our country is being demographically replaced, I think that's bad. Oh, you're a kinist. You need to get out of here. But the non-white people that are like, yeah, kill whitey. I didn't hear that. I'm not going to do anything about that. Like they don't enforce any of that against them.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. It's only ever going to be against any white people who are like, hey, I think that like it's wrong to discriminate against white people in hiring practices. That sounds kiddish. We better get rid of this guy. That's the dynamic. So how do you operate in a church environment where that is the case?
I mean, I would push back on it hard. Like that's unacceptable. I think that people like this. So this is where, speaking truth within the context, and different church structures have different ways, different mechanisms to facilitate those conversations. But I think that that's those types of narratives and the obvious anti-white discrimination that happens in big regime evangelical contexts needs to be pushed back against. I think that we have a right as Christians, and this is, this has always been the case, that we have the confidence, we should have the confidence to speak truthfully, even to our ministers. Speak respectfully. They are an authority over you. But I think it needs to be pushed back against. In other words, it's one of those one of those at stake civilizational matters and concerns that you can't just ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
And these pastors are so aloof. They have no idea exactly what is happening. They're completely siloed within their own world, so they don't understand exactly what is happening. They'll blame MAGA.
Reality to them.
They can't describe what's motivating this upheaval.
No, they can't. And if they even begin to, it's going to be mediated through mass media, right? Any mechanism that they have to understand it, it's going to be, it's motivated by white people hating black people or any other.
This is why Francis was so spot on when he said that liberalism really borrows from and distorts Christianity. Like you wouldn't see the power that liberalism has in our nation if they hadn't been able to weaponize Christianity. Yeah, that was a prerequisite for it.
No, certainly, and so part of it, I think, is just simply, recognizing the fact that white people are hated in their own country and are second-class citizens in their own country, and like just recognizing that, admitting that is the reality, and then operating from there. But you do that, and the Christian institutions that are already been weaponized against white people, they'll hit back hard, and they are.
Yeah,
right. That's what's occurring. But like you said, I don't think anyone should. They shouldn't agitate within churches. They shouldn't cause controversies within their churches, right? They should be peaceable. They should submit to authority as much as they possibly can.
Let's talk about equality, right? Because equality was part of the name of the speech.
Yes.
So, I mean, equality is a false god of our time, obviously, and Sam Francis does not consider equality as all that important for political tranquility. So maybe discuss that a little bit. Like what can we do to rethink equality, and why is it this false god that's actually dangerous for the well-being of a nation?
Yeah. So when he talks about equality, it's not equality as it was classically understood by the people that framed our order, right? Because they would use that language, they would talk about equality. But it would
some of them would, yeah.
But it would be equality under the law, right? That's the primary concern that they had is that the law would apply to everyone equally, right? Not that every single person is a tabula rasa and totally equal in every respect, right? That's nonsense. It's absurd, right? People are not equal, right? There are people that are way smarter than me. There are people that are way dumber than me. There are people that are way better looking than me. There are people that are way uglier than me somehow, right? Like that. There is no equality anywhere, right? The only place that there's equality is in hell, right? That's that's the reality, right? God made a world where people are not the same, right? Different people are different, and different groups of people are different, right? That is reality, right? I always say this to people where it's like, do you think that like you could take the Aborigines of Papua New Guinea and just like airdrop them in modern America and they would do okay? Well, of course not, right? They would struggle mightily with that. I mean, you actually see this in Australia with the Aborigines there, that even after generations of like forced integration and social programs and things like that, they still struggle compared to white Australians because they're different people, right? And if we're in Australia, I'd probably go to jail for saying that. They'd lock me up for saying that. But that's the reality. They are different people. They're not the same, and so groups of people are different, and that is like the great lie that we are told, that everybody's all the same. Everybody, every individual is the same. Every group is the same, and that lie has become obvious to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the great political conflict is untangling that lie from our society.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing, like one of the things that you said was that equality under the law was more what the founders were getting at. And even there, I think that that's overstated, because I think it's better to say that it was sort of an equality of all the participating classes.
Yeah.
Because if you actually read their journals and their writings and their letters and the way that they thought through, like Naturalization Act of 1770, whatever, 79 or whatever,
1790. Yeah.
They did not think even in terms of equality under the law. They thought that people who are participating as citizens in the republic, like this is a very classical, they're like appealing to the Roman citizenry and some of those things. That's where the equality was, not with all people.
No,
not with all people, universally construed. Otherwise, like people will say, well, they just didn't apply it well. I think that they were smart enough to recognize that if they had a universalist definition of that, it would be at odds with things like slavery. I think that they understood that. But I think Thomas Jefferson, for instance, I don't even think he who wrote the Declaration of Independence had this universalist definition in mind.
Well, that's always the thing too. It's like, oh, all men are created equal. And it's like, but he wrote that while owning slaves. And it's like, yeah, like this, meaning like that's like a big own of Thomas Jefferson or something. But it's like, no, they were fully conscious of what they were doing.
They knew what they were. Yeah.
This wasn't. There wasn't this hypocritical thing, or like the Immigration Act of 17,
it's not hypocrisy.
Naturalization Act of 1790,
it's just particularism,
where it precluded our own Aboriginal peoples, right, the American Indians from.
Doesn't the Constitution even say that they're savages in the Constitution?
Something like that, yeah.
So it's like,
but
they didn't have this universalist.
They didn't view them as part of the nation that existed.
Why? Because nation is
because they're evil and racist and they're horrible, awful people.
Because the nation is a people, and they were their own nations. That's why.
That's the thing. It's like you see these like libs all over the place. Like, oh, they were in America before you were, and it's like, well, no, America didn't exist until it was created.
Yeah,
exactly. By Americans,
exactly.
Right? That it's a distinct, discrete thing. It isn't just the landmass where people were. It was. Right, the actual peoples constructing a nation, constructing its laws, its ways, its particular governance. That is what it was, and what it is. And so, it never was viewed in these terms of all human beings on planet Earth have a right to what we have. Right? They
didn't
never
think like
understood it that way.
No.
Of course not. That America is a distinct people.
Yeah.
And that's the classical understanding of it that existed until the middle of the 20th century. I mean, this is why we're still working on it. We're almost ready to release episode 1 of repealing the 20th
As
century.
people can tell, we're making changes on the show.
Yeah, we're making lots of changes here, but I think this is a good lead in to those discussions, because the first one is on immigration and on how Americans understood themselves as a people.
Yeah.
That's the defining thing with regard to the discussion of immigration,
Mhm.
is who and what are we as a people.
Mhm. One of the things I think Sam Francis was great at in this speech was he was able to recognize that all the movies and the entertainment and the literature and the music and all the things that was being mass produced in the 70s and 80s was actually leading up to, it was building a foundation for actual political power.
Yeah.
So the things that we see today in the administrative state, right, and in the state level and education departments and all these things, they're actually they had to prepare the people to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like if parents know that their kids,
Manufacturing consent.
yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And if the kids know that if parents know that their kids are being taught anti-white stuff in schools, they've been so desensitized to it by the movies and the media and all these things for years that they don't even recognize it. Or if they see it, they're like, yeah, I guess that's just the way it is.
Well, and you see this with I'm sure you've been paying attention to the reels that or TikToks, or what are they? With the little short movies that
how do you do Velo Zoomers?
That's right. That John Doyle is making on Black History Month.
Oh yes, those are great.
But
Endorsed.
The reason why they're so good is because, like, this month in every school in the country, all of the things that he's talking about and like debunking in these videos, every little kid, every little 7-year-old in America is being taught that Harriet Tubman launched all of these raids against the Confederacy or whatever, and it's like all this stuff is made up.
Mm-hmm.
It never happened. It wasn't real. Or like the Tulsa race massacre was like, oh, actually, like, black people started firing on a crowd of whites, and then there was a reprisal, and it wasn't like this, Wakanda district of Tulsa where it was the wealthiest place on earth that they just burned down, the Black Wall Street or whatever. It was like a barbershop and a couple grocery stores. And it's like, but we're made to think that, like, oh, this thing happened. None of it was real. It was all fake. And so this entire month, little school children are being taught all sorts of preposterous things that are not true at all. And what is the purpose of it? It's to get them to hate themselves, being white. It's to get them to be cowed and bow down, and to think that the country that they are the heirs of is the most evil place in the world, and it's simply not true at all. And like you said, like, the parents of these kids are desensitized to it entirely, where when they see these things, right, it doesn't bother them at all, because they believe it too. Right? They were taught all those things when they were 7 years old in second grade or first grade or whatever. And so they have been manufacturing the consent of people for a very, very, very long time. And the irony, though, is, like, because of the internet and things like this, that, like, high school kids, when it gets to this point, and I was like this when I was in high school, I would have loved to have had the internet when I was in high school, because I could have caused even more trouble. You could just say, like, hey, like, all the Harriet Tubman stuff, that was just made up by a communist, by one single communist in the 1940s or 1930s. And you tell your teacher to look it up. You're like, oh, well, be that as it may, white people are still evil. Like, I think that's what's happening now. Like you said, the younger generation is not as it is much more immune to the propaganda than prior generations were.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
But there still is no like centralizing thing. There is it's just like random kids that are like unplugging from the matrix. There's no unplugging them from it and then plugging them into something else. There is nothing for them to be part of. This is like, look, I don't want my country to be destroyed.
Yeah.
I don't want I don't want to be treated as a second-class citizen in my own country. There's nothing for them that like stands behind them, backs them up, and fights for them. Yet.
Well, and this is one of the interesting things, because yes, it's true that we are more and more people are waking up to this. On the other hand, it's like now the regime and its narratives are like a caged animal. And so now I think that it's easy to get optimistic that the narratives are crashing
easy
down.
To get optimistic.
and people are coming to terms with what's really been happening. On the other hand, I don't think we have really seen yet the counterattack by the regime to make sure that their narratives are instilled.
What would that counterattack look like?
Kicking people off the internet, closing down podcasts like this one, forcing YouTube to take down the San Francis, getting people in trouble, giving them citations, and giving them, kicking them out of schools.
So kind of like it does in England.
In England,
or
yes, that's
Australia.
exactly what's happening over there. That's exactly what's happening over there.
Yeah,
is that people are waking up, but they cannot allow it. Their entire narrative infrastructure is built on it, and so it could get very dark. America's better suited, I think, to take it.
I was gonna say, I think if those things were to occur in America, at least as it's presently comprised, the reaction against such a heavy hand would be intense. That then you would gin up like explicitly pro-white, like consciously pro-white political activity. And where it's, I mean, the reason why that doesn't happen is because it's very gauche. It's very it's very like, if you said I am a pro-white whatever, right? People will look at you like you're some kind of freak, right? But if it's to the point where it's in for a penny, in for a pound, right? It's like, I'm gonna go to jail otherwise, right? Well, who really cares? I think if they do take a heavy hand against it,
I think they have to try.
I think you're right.
It's almost inevitable that they have to try.
What it will summon is the thing that will destroy it. That's what it seems to me.
I agree. And you need the dialectic to play out. I agree. Like you can't look, I think that was he a federal congressman, or is he just a state level?
No, I think this is a U.S. congressman.
He's a U.S. congressman.
Woo guy. Yeah.
Like they're actually thinking like that.
Oh,
and the media is behind them.
Yeah.
And
they all think that way.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, you think they're just going to walk away from their plan, from their objectives?
Yeah. The Mamdanis and AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett's.
No, they're going to double down because it's existential for them and their political path too.
Yeah.
So, the idea that it's going to come to a head and it's going to explode, I don't think is avoidable.
The only way, I mean, I think there's a narrow way in which it is avoidable. And that is if the political power of the Democratic Party is so destroyed, whether it's through immigration efforts and being bankrupted, right? I mean, you've seen this that I think it's probably because of like anti-fraud efforts and USAID and things like this. Like their coffers are empty compared to the Republican Party, and meanwhile, all they do is just double down on the insane things, on the racial antagonism and the anti-white racism, and on like the trans stuff and all of those things, where because they're in this like purity spiral where it just intensifies more and more and more and more. There is no like moderating element within them at all. That it could become such that
the problem
that they just
is
simply lose. But
The problem is that a lot of the hegemonic power is at the institutional and private level.
That's true. Yeah.
And a lot of the money flows are coming from like NGOs and charities and
Yeah.
international corporations. And so like, yeah, the Democratic Party is in a really bad place, but a lot of the power exists outside of the Democrat Party. That's why
Well, it's
the
true.
Republican Party
Yeah.
is so weak.
Well, the Republican Party is so weak, and the Republican Party, constantly buckles to these things. I mean, you see this with the Trump, the latest Trump hoax with the autoplay video where 1 second of the next video played and it was the Obamas as monkeys or something. And what did you see? Like all of these GOP congressmen and senators freak out over that. Like, oh, this is the worst thing. I can't believe he did this. And it's like, well, one, it was like, it's clear there was no like intent behind it at all. And secondly, like, who cares? At the same time. And
well, in context, there was like many sets of politicians in
in the whole video. But regardless, it was just some like dumb boomer slop AI video that the screen grab caught 1 second of the next video. But like the point is, like all of these GOP figures couldn't just like wait.
Yeah.
They were chomping at the bit to denounce Trump as a racist. Like they couldn't wait for an opportunity to say this guy's terrible and he's a racist and he's evil. And what that demonstrates, I think, is that the GOP is as much captured by this stuff
Oh yeah.
institutional level as
And Sam
as the
Francis
left
said that
is.
back
And-
in the 80s.
I mean, he was saying that. I mean, if you listen, it's hard to listen to the Q&A in that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's saying like, why even vote for Republicans?
Right.
Like what good was it? I mean, he's talking about like Bush v. Clinton.
And in some ways, though, the Republican Party, when he was saying this, was in a worse. I mean,
Much worse.
Well, in some ways, it
Yeah.
was better, but in some ways, it was actually a lot worse because
Yeah.
there was no outlet or access for people like us.
yeah.
That was the problem. Now there are people that like Eric Schmidt
Yeah.
and
There's
some others.
a mega, a certain nationalist constituency in the
Yes.
Republican Party where the voters have had a taste of American nationalism, and smart politicians are giving it to them. And nothing like that existed in the 1990s whatsoever. And we can talk about all of the criticisms of Trump and things that he's done wrong and everything else. But the fact that even a taste of that exists with him, that there is any immigration enforcement that's taking place, however minor, however small, is a massive change from where it was in the 1990s. And it'd be interesting if he were still alive. I think he still would be very black-pilled about everything, probably.
Well, like his colleagues are, like Pat Buchanan's black pill.
Oh yeah, they
Paul
all are.
Gottfried, and
They all are, because they see that he was right
Yeah.
about all of these things 30 years ago, and that yes, things have changed, but they haven't changed nearly enough to be able to hold at bay what is coming for us. And at the same time, I mean, I'm optimistic for the reasons that you've laid out, that the coming generations actually have the will to fight for America as a distinct people and place. The fact that JD Vance, at his acceptance speech for the vice presidential nomination, said as much explicitly, that America is a people, right? This lies on the face of political doctrine, of half a century of political doctrine, to say, America is a people. It's a distinct people. It's not just an idea. That should give us hope that the future lies in an American politics that is centered around pursuing the good of our people. That it is explicitly pro-American as a distinct people. And I think that's what the future will hold, even though, like you said, the institutions, right, all of them everywhere are still the way that they've always been our entire lives. And that will take a long time to
Those will
change.
take a long time. There's a lot of money, power that they have.
Hundreds of billions of dollars
Mhm.
are situated in the in the status quo, and any change to that would mean a shift in hundreds of billions of dollars and where that money goes. And so it's an existential threat to the regime for it to change like that. But at the same time, right, the regime itself is an existential threat to us as a people. So somebody has to win.
Exactly. Yep. Well, any last thoughts? I think we talked through it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, we kind of
covered everything. Yeah. It was only a 25-minute speech.
It's a very short speech. The Q&A was even longer.
Well, you know what's funny? What stood out to me is that, like, we have these types of conversations all the time, but to people in 1994 going to this conference and listening to Sam Francis speak, they were like, "Whoa,
This is very radical.
this is groundbreaking." But this is normal. JD Vance kind of talks like this sometimes.
Yeah.
That's actually stood out to me.
Yeah.
That, like, the normalization of the framing, of the rhetoric, of the story, of the friend enemy distinction, it's all here for us.
Yeah, this is stuff that our guys have been thinking through in these terms for years now. And you have these discussions with anybody, and it's more or less normal. But yeah, in 1994, this was incredibly radical because nobody saw it. They didn't think about it in these terms. I mean, it reminds me of reading Christopher Caldwell's Age of Enlightenment. Or what is that? Entitlement.
Entitlement. Sorry.
Entitlement. Yeah. And discussing the changes in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And Francis brought this up, the making Martin Luther King Day a federal holiday and things like this. And I had until I read that book, I had no idea that was actually incredibly controversial.
Yeah.
And that, like, the state of Arizona
barely passed,
refused to do it. And the only, they finally accepted it because, like, back to the NFL wasn't going to have the Super Bowl or something in Arizona, and it forced them to do it.
What does that tell you about the Super Bowl?
What does it tell you about well, it's a significant cultural institution in America, and it's used as a cudgel.
Yeah, of course.
Our enemies own it. That's reality. Like, of course it is. But and it's that way with all popular culture. That they own it, and they've weaponized it against Americans, and against their own identity, their own historical rootedness. That really is the lesson of the post-war world. Is you are not allowed to have any conscious identity as a people. You're not allowed to have any historical rootedness. You're not allowed to have any historical way of life. That you are an empty vessel, and that we will determine what you will be. Right? We will determine what you love and what you hate. We will determine what you think is good and what you think is evil. Right? That is not something that's transmitted from your ancestors to you. That line is cut off. Right now you are ours completely. We own your soul. That's the lesson of these things. That's what they did to Americans. You don't have a connection to Davy Crockett or to Ulysses S. Grant if you're from the North, or Robert E. Lee if you're from the South. You don't have any connection to those people. Right? They were all evil and bad.
Yeah.
You are a new man, a new American. Right? You are what we say you are. And so the challenge is to reassert your own historical rootedness, to have a connection to your past, so that you can have a future.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Well, that was Sam Francis #1.
Yeah, we'll go back to Dr. Francis, I think,
We will.
quite often in the future. But let us know what you think, what your comments are. I think we're going to have the speech itself in links, right?
Yeah, we'll put it in there.
So you could watch that and see if you agree with our commentary on it. like and subscribe and share this.
You want to say anything about your Friday show? By the time this goes live, you may have already had your first one.
I'll have had my first one with the first one's with Jade Burden. So we're gonna hang out and have fun.
So you're doing that every Friday?
Every Friday, yeah. We had to, before we went live here, we had
a little fight.
We had to fight about when who's gonna get the studio and when. So CJ's mom's basement here, who gets to have it. But that will be live this Friday. We'll continue to go live. And I think after that, you and I are going to do a movie review.
It's already signing me up for things.
Yeah, I already told you the movie you have to watch. And so CJ is not able to sit and watch movies. It's not something he can do. He doesn't have the attention span for it. So I told him, like, we'll just watch 5-minute segments of this movie, and then maybe you'll have it finished by the end of the month. But yeah, we'll keep doing that. That'll be fun. And yeah, you have interviews that you have coming up. What interviews do you have?
I do. I have several coming up. I just did one with who did I do it with? I don't even remember. It was last week.
So many of them he doesn't remember.
So many. No, Time and Klein. I did the first one, Time and Klein.
Yes.
David Edgington, who wrote the book on reviling wives with New Christian Press. So that's coming out. It should be out today, which is Wednesday. Next week, I'll have an episode with Will Tanner on Rhodesia. And we got Jeff Shepard on Nixon and Watergate.
Oh, boy.
You're going to watch that one.
Yeah.
And many more. So every Wednesday is the interviews.
Excellent. All right. And then, we should have repealing the 20th century. We should get the 20th century repealed very soon.
Yeah. We'll get the 20th century repealed before the 22nd century comes.
Before we get to the 22nd century.
Yeah.
Very
all
good.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful week, and you all stay peacefully dangerous, and we'll see you next time.